Gem. Rocking Roadsters.
You're just a bunch of losers, sneered Roxy as she stared insolently at the holograms. And the Misfits are just a gang of scarecrows who couldn't play their way out of a paper bag, returned Aja. You kids are okay when it comes to talk, drawled Stormer, but that's all you ever do. Will you take up the challenge? Too right we will, said Aja before Gem could stop her. And Kimber added, the first one to arrive at the music bowl plays in the concert. The confrontation between the two girl rock bands was proving to be an angry one. There was a great rivalry between the bands, but the latest bitter argument had in fact arisen through a genuine mistake. It had been agreed that the Starlight Music Company should provide their top act to play live at the open-air concert in the massive Music Bowl Stadium. Rio, the manager of the Holograms, assumed that the concert organizers wanted Gem and the girls to play. Eric Raymond, manager of the Misfits, had decided that his group would be appearing. Eric Raymond would use every underhand and mean trick that he could think of to see that the Misfits gained at Gem's expense, but this was a simple mix-up. The problem was trying to solve it. The two girl groups had chanced to meet in the entrance hall of the Starlight Music Company. That was when they discovered what had happened. Neither group was prepared to back down. It was Stormer who hit on the novel idea of solving the deadlock. Why not make it first come, first served, she suggested. We both send our gear down to the music bowl, then we have a race to see who arrives first at the gig. What do you mean by a race? Asked Gem suspiciously. We all meet here at the Starlight offices, said Stormer. You crumbs in the Rockin' Roadster, and we'll come in our own car. We'll set off at the same time, and the group that makes it to the music bowl first gets to play the concert. But that's a stupid idea, protested Gem. Yeah, it's stupid because you know that you wimps will lose out, said Pizzazz. Gem tried to cool things down, for she knew that it was best not to get involved with the Misfits. But the insults and taunts had hurt the other girls, and they were determined not to be seen to chicken out of a challenge. Reluctantly, Gem sided with the Holograms, and it was decided that there would be a race of the rock bands. But it's got to be a straight car race, said Gem. There's to be no tricks. Tricks? Exclaimed Stormer, a look of innocence in her face. Now what makes you think we'd try any tricks? Gem and the girls were seated in the Rockin' Roadster outside the Starlight Music offices. Suddenly, there was a squeal of tires and a dark, sleek Cadillac screeched to a halt inches from the Roadster's front bumper. The motor had ornate design on the bonnet, making it resemble an unpleasant, grinning face. Hiya, losers, greeted Pizzazz. Like the auto? We call it the Dark Demon. Call it what you want, said Gem. The Rockin' Roadster will win the race for us. When do we start? By way of answer, the Dark Demon roared into life and pulled away down the road. The sound of the Misfits singing, Out of My Way, came blaring from the cassette speaker. Guess that means we've started, said Gem, turning on the ignition. Come on, Roadster, let's get rocking. It was, of course, very short-sighted to imagine that the Misfits were going to take part in a fair challenge. The only contests they entered were the sort that were rigged when they were bound to win. The Music Bowl was located some 200 miles from the starting point of the race, and Gem and the girls had reckoned on a traveling time of 3 hours. However, they had reckoned without the scheming of the Misfits. Before reaching the edge of town, the road went past a large record store. As Gem pulled up at the traffic lights, she could see that there was a crowd of youngsters milling around on the pavement. Banners were draped across the store windows announcing, Here today, Gem and the Holograms. Straight away, the crowds noticed the girls and cheered and waved. But they've all come to see us, said Kimber in surprise. We didn't arrange this, did we? Asked Shayna. We didn't arrange to come here, said Gem, but somebody made the arrangements, and I can guess who. Quick, drive on, said Aja. We haven't got time to stop if we're to beat the Misfits. Gem shook her head. Although they had been tricked, there was no way she would disappoint her fans when they had come to see her. The Misfits had known that Jem and the girls had to drive past the store and that they were bound to be seen by the crowd. It was too late to explain that there had been a mix-up or drive away and pretend that nothing had happened. "I never really wanted to play at the Music Bowl anyway," said Jem jokingly. None of the others replied. They had desperately wanted to be the ones to perform in the concert. The 15-minute autograph signing session had been a great success. Kimber was even thinking about setting off in pursuit of the Misfits, but Jem knew that it would be impossible to make up for the lost time. The rockin' Roadster was fast, but nothing on the road could move fast enough to overtake Eric Raymond's terrible trio. While in the store, a sturdily built man had made his way to Jem and asked if she would sign a copy of her new disc for his little girl. Although Jem had done so, the man had hovered around the edge of the crowd as if he wanted to speak to her again. The girls piled into the Roadster while the store manager thanked them. Once again, the burly man stood close by. He came forward as if to speak, but seemed to think better of it and retreated into the crowd. "Who's that tall guy? You know him?" Jem asked the store manager.
"Sure," replied the manager. "He's Tom Newell. Lives just around the corner. Poor guy's little daughter was involved in an accident last week. She's still in a coma."
The manager paused and smiled.
"I imagine Tom came to get your autograph. His little girl thinks you're great."
"Ready to go, Jem?" asked Kimber, leaning across to the driver's seat. "The Misfits mustn't beat us." "Yep, we're ready to go," said Jem. "But we aren't chasing after those Misfit creeps. We're going to see Tom Newell." Katie Newell lay motionless on her bed. Her long blonde hair was draped across her pillow. Her eyelids were tightly closed. The faintest of movements showed that she was still breathing. Apart from this, she looked lifeless. Tom Newell bent down to the girl and whispered gently,
"Katie, she's come to see you. Jem's here."
The child lay still. "Katie, honey," said Jem softly, "how are you? Won't it be great when you're better and you can come to see one of my concerts with your father?" There was not a flicker of life in the young girl's features. Tom turned away sadly. It seemed to Jem that the strength had gone from his huge shoulders, and he stood dejected and defeated. "You did more than anyone could ask," he said, forcing a smile. "I hoped that your voice might bring my Katie round. I'm so grateful that you came to see her. Katie would have been so thrilled, if only she'd known. Maybe someday she'll come round and make it to one of your concerts." Jem's face lit up with hope. "That's it, Tom," she cried. "Let's give Katie a concert now." There was a child's guitar at Katie's bedside. Jem picked it up and handed it to Shayna. "Tom's got a piano in the sitting room," said Jem. "You play that, Kimber, and you, Aja, get some pots and pans from the kitchen and make yourself a drum set." At the start of the day, Jem and the Holograms had looked forward to playing before a packed house of thousands. Now, they were giving a concert to an audience of one, and no one even knew if she was able to hear them. Much as she adored her fans, Jem would not have swapped the situation for the world. It was midway through the third number when Tom gave a whoop of joy and leapt into the air like a small boy. Katie's fingers had moved. For a second, her eyelids opened and she looked round the room. Her eyes lit up and she mouthed the words, "Jem," before closing her eyelids. There was a smile of happiness on her face and the slightest hint of color in her pale cheeks. "You've done it!" roared Tom, dancing round the room, hugging the girls. "You've got through to her! That started her back on the road to recovery. How can I ever thank you?" "Apart from getting us to the Music Bowl in record time, there's nothing we want," joked Jem. Tom's face became serious. He took Jem's arms and propelled her next door into a map-lined room. "The Music Bowl, you said?" he said, pointing a large finger to the map. Briefly, Jem explained the situation. When she finished, Tom threw back his huge head and laughed loudly. You want to arrive at the music bowl in your rockin' roadster before these unpleasant-sounding misfits? He said. Consider it done, Jem. But hurry, there isn't much time. Out of my way, get out of my way, sang Roxy. Ha ha! Those hologram wimps are well out of our way by now, grinned Pizzazz. Won't Eric Raymond be pleased when he finds out how we outsmarted Jem, chuckled Stormer. The music bowl was now in sight. The Misfits had cruised down the motorway in the Dark Demon. They were waiting at a railway crossing that had the barriers down. A goods train pulled up and stopped on the track. Hey, get out of my way, yelled Roxy, slamming her fist on the car horn. What are those dumb creeps doing stopping a train here? Unperturbed by the noise of the Misfits, a group of men jumped down from the train and started to open the large metal doors of the end carriage. One door swung down to the ground to form a ramp. Next second, a car drove out of the train. The Rockin' Roadster! Screamed Pizzazz. Hello! Chorused Jem and the Holograms as they waved from their car. The barriers were raised on one side of the track, allowing the Roadster to move back on the road. The barriers on the Misfits side remained down, so they were forced to wait. You can't do this! Cried Stormer, shaking a fist at Jem. We just have done! Shouted Jem. The enraged Misfits weren't to know that Tom Newell was the boss of a huge freight train company. He had seen to it that the Rockin' Roadster was moved at speed along the rail route, which was considerably shorter than the journey by road. We'll leave you some tickets at the box office, laughed Jem to the Misfits. You can come and watch us. Jem swung the wheel of the Rockin' Roadster to take the car on the road to the music bowl. She was already thinking about introducing their first number. It will be dedicated to Katie Newell.